see Menorca at its best. When we get everyone on board, later today I'll be passing some photographs around, and one of them I'm quite proud of, in fact, but it's a photograph of a field taken in May of 2005. A little bit late perhaps, it was the end of May, it should have been more like the beginning of May when I take it. And if you could just close your eyes and visualize every single field being a sea of wildflowers, a patchwork quilt of colour, then that's what Menorca's all about between March and usually the end of May. We'll be going along the fringe of the centrally forested area after lunch, and it's then when I'll be describing all the trees to you, and also a bit more about the flora and the fauna. Indigenous to the island are evergreen. And now, having had that first rain, everything is looking much greener than it was just 10 days ago. We get Sahara sand falling out of a clear blue sky all the way through the summer months, and especially those days straight after I've washed the car or Sheila's put the washing out or something. And it just lays over not only all the meadows but also over all the trees, making them look dull. Now you've got trees like this pine tree ahead of us, the Alepan pine, the only example you'll see today of that particular species, which is beautifully green once more. Most of our towns are the nearest to Ceutadella. It's just 17 kilometers in fact to our ancient capital. Again, a very good place on those bridle paths for another blacksmith during the 17th century to actually build his blacksmith shop. But during the British times, just beyond the hills that you'll see when we get to Ferriers, there were 3 Scottish regiments actually stationed. And of course, right up until the 20th century, in fact, after the 20th century, during the 20th century, not just before, the British Army had to have many more blacksmiths to keep the military machine turning, the gun carriage wheels and the horses shod. And in the English language, a military blacksmith is called a farrier. Not in the Spanish, but in the local language of Menorca, a blacksmith is called a ferrer. So they literally called the little town the blacksmiths, Ferriers. The ravine there on our left hand side just starting, because we've never had any running rivers. In fact, we've got no reservoirs or anything like that, but more about that later. Never been any running rivers on Menorca. These ravines were heaved up out of the Mediterranean during the Mycenaean era, just about 10 million years ago. And as we turn left to go down to Caragaldana, then we've got on the right hand side the ravine of Algendar, just starting again as a low depression. They gradually get deeper and deeper until they go through cliffs over 250 feet high. And these ravines are wonderful places to walk even on the hottest of summer days. In July and August you're actually sheltered from the sun by the cliffs, but also by the pine trees going out of the cliffs. There's little Roman footpaths that wind down the side of some of these ravines. And with a microclimate totally different to the rest of the island. It's so much cooler in the summer. And you'll still see grazing on the meadows in these ravines where they have those herds of cattle which you won't see over the rest of the island. From June to October. In fact, most of the actual cows are kept in milking parlours. It's just too hot. They would stop giving milk, and of course that is our main industry of Menorca. Also in some of these ravines you'll find there's groves of exotic fruits being grown because it's so much warmer in the winter. And so immediately on our right as we turn here, we've got the ravine of Al Jandar, which goes down into Cala Galdana. Cala Galdana being called Guadal Anna by the Arabs, when this was an Arab island, literally meaning the river Anna. However, of course, no rivers. What they thought was a river was just the low part of the ravine entering the sea. Spanish couldn't say Guadalana, so it reverted to Galdana instead. It's over top of these ravines at first thing in the morning, and just before dusk you'll see soaring those fantastic birds of prey that the island is so famous for. And all under protection since we became a reserve of the biosphere 13 years ago. And gradually they're increasing in number. We've got between 10 and 12 pairs of the booted eagles and the Egyptian vultures that you've no doubt seen while you've been here on holiday, one or two of them anyway. Dozens of pairs of red kites, and just a few pairs of different types of kestrels and hawks. In fact, kept totally secret from us for a couple of years, but announced a couple of months ago we got 2 pairs of golden eagles on the island, and they have had fledglings this year. Those fledglings are now flying, and we saw over here, literally right ahead of us, a couple of weeks ago, one of the adult golden eagles at a great height hovering. But if you came along here in 2 or 3 weeks' time, just about dusk, the skies would suddenly blacken with millions upon millions of birds dipping and soaring, just like shoals of fish in the sea, until just as the sun goes down over the top of the mountains of Mallorca, which lie almost directly ahead of us, those birds too disappear into the treetops to roost for the night. Because we're on the direct flight path of almost 180 different species of birds which migrate from Europe into North Africa every year. The birds that never cease to